Okay, so this is a brief guide to managing Chrome OS devices on your Google Apps domain. Now, I'm a teacher. I'm not trained in any way as a system administrator, although that is part of my job now. So I just want to show you how pretty straightforward managing Chrome OS devices are, and a few of the things that we've done that I see asked about frequently on particularly some of the forums about how to do a certain thing with Chrome OS and how to make it behave in a particular way, and a few things perhaps to avoid. So anyways, you need to be able to sign on to your domain as a super administrator. This assumes that you've enrolled your devices into your domain. So you need to have bought a Chrome OS Management license for each device that you buy. In the UK that's £19, and that allows you to manage things within the management console. Otherwise you'll have limited control, and I really do recommend you do get a management license. To enroll a device, there's two ways of doing it. One of them is to allow users to enroll a device, and it automatically enrolls as soon as they sign on. Or you can press Ctrl-Alt-E when the device first starts up, once it's connected to a network, and then you just need to sign in with a username and password from your domain, and that will enroll the device. I might do a video about device enrollment at another point, but it is pretty straightforward, and the guides on the Google website are pretty good. Okay, so this is using the new look management console. So what we need to do is go into device management. If you don't see device management, click on the more controls down here and other things will pop up. You will need to be a super administrator to be able to do the things I'm about to do. So click on device management, and you should see two things: mobile management, so that's management of your mobile devices, so phones and things. That's a story for another day. You can manage Android devices to some extent using the Google Apps Management Console straight up. So we want Chrome management, and once that's loaded up, what you get are user settings, public session settings. I'm not going to cover public session settings. That would be for things if you wanted a Chromebook or box in a public location that maybe visitors are going to use, things like that. Lots of interesting possibilities for that. Device settings, network, and devices. So if you've enrolled some devices on your domain, let's say you've done it manually, we click on devices, they will appear in the root of your domain. So you will have your domain name here, and all your devices will be listed here. What I strongly recommend you do is create some sub-organizational units and organize your devices into those. Another approach is to have the devices in the same sub-organizational unit as your users. That is more appropriate if you're doing something like a one-to-one deployment. To add a sub-organizational unit to your domain, you click on the big blue button, Add Sub-Organization, and these can include users or Chrome OS devices or both. Now at the moment we haven't got a one-to-one deployment, although that's the way we're moving. So our devices are in a sub-organizational unit called Chrome devices, and if I expand that, we've got a lot of different types of sub-organizational units here, so English, humanities, home use, Chromebooks, and so on. So depending on what that device is going to be used for and the sorts of policies you want to apply to it, you put it into an appropriate sub-organizational unit. So if I click on English Chromebooks, which happens to be the top one, you'll see a lot of devices now appear with their serial number, status active, when they were enrolled, February, earlier this year, last time they were synced, so that's basically the last time they were used, which was Friday. This has been recorded on a Sunday, so last school day they were used. And if you want to move a device, say this was in the root of your your organization, you can just click it, or you can multiple click, and then you've got more options. Move organization. So you can, this one here, ignore that, that's to move the sub-organizational unit into a different one. So move to, and then you'll have a little thingamajiggy, and I could put them into Science Chromebooks. So you can move devices around. You can do the same thing for users, of course. That's a useful thing. You can export a list of all your devices, which if you have some other inventory system, database or whatever, might be an important, useful thing to do. If you click onto a machine, you'll see some information about it, and you can edit machines, and in some cases, if it's a machine that's used by a particular user, you might want to put in a user name in here, or just the name of a person, perhaps some notes. If it belongs into a particular location, you can, and I have done that for some devices that belong to certain people. Well, not belong, they're used by certain people, they're school devices. So I know that X user has that particular device, and they're responsible for it, and they've signed for it. So we go back to English Chromebooks. So this is where you organize your devices into some sort of structure. Either put them with users or put them into a place like I've done. English, got humanities Chromebooks, maths Chromebooks, got science Chromebooks, SEN Chromebooks, sixth form Chromeboxes, staff Chromebooks, and so on. How you organize it is up to you, but it's important you think about it, because this will allow you, just an alarm going off, this will allow you to apply policies to all the machines within that suborganizational unit, which is the next bit. So we go back to Chrome Management. You need your devices to be able to connect to a network. This is where things can get thorny depending on how your Wi-Fi is set up, but if I click on Network, you can apply networks to either devices or users. So if you want a certain group of users to connect to a certain network, you can do that. Or if you want your devices to connect to a certain network, you can do that. So there's a little toggle thing here for users. I haven't got any Wi-Fi settings for users, but I do have Wi-Fi settings for devices. So this is actually applied at the root level of our domain. So basically all of our Chromebooks get two SSIDs, so they can connect to two networks. So we've got one here called Wi-Fi Wheatley Park. This is an old one which will be vanishing in the next 6 months, and will be down to just this one, which will be school-wide. And this has a single pre-shared key, which is only ever typed in and set in the management console. We've also got Bring Your Own Device, which is authenticated via a Radius server and a captive web portal. But this just allows our Chromebooks to just automatically connect, in theory, and that's it. So you can add Wi-Fi by clicking on Add Wi-Fi, give it a name of the SSID, security type, so you can do all sorts of things here, but our Chrome one is that one. It has a passphrase and it has a direct connection to the internet. You can do enterprise if you want to, and that gets a little bit more complicated and is beyond the scope of this. If you want to know more about that, give us a shout. Direct connection to the internet. This is an interesting one. If your school has proxy settings, this is where you'd set them for a particular network. Now you can set proxy settings with users, but that gets messy, and I'll tell you why in a minute. I would strongly recommend, if you're going to be using ChromeOS devices, you have a transparent gateway and you don't have any proxy settings. Proxy settings cause a world of pain. So if I set up manual proxy settings, you can see all the things that you'd need. So the address to your proxy setting and the port that it's using and so on. And I'll leave that there. We'll come back to proxy settings when we look at user settings. So you're connected to the internet. Bear in mind, a device that's not enrolled won't pick up these policies, and therefore you will have to either manually connect it to the Wi-Fi, or what I find is useful is using a USB Ethernet adapter, plugging it directly into the network, getting it to pick up an IP address that way. enrolling it, it'll pick up policy, then it'll pick up the Wi-Fi, and then you don't have to faff around putting in keys and things. So we go back to Chrome Management. So we go to Device Settings next. Now, all of these settings can be applied to one or more organizational units or your domain as a whole. So Device Settings starts at the root domain, weeklypart.org in our case, and you can see that we've got all of the sub-organizational units, so I could apply settings to students if I wanted to, but I'm going to look at Chrome devices. But I'll start with the domain-wide settings. So, device enrollment, allow devices to enroll automatically. What that means is if you take a Chromebook, you take it out of the box, you power it up, assuming it's connected to a network, and the user logs onto it, a user from your domain, it will be automatically enrolled. And that's useful, especially if you've got a big one-to-one deployment. That will be the way to do it. Place device in user organization during auto-enrollment. Now, we haven't got a one-to-one deployment, but if you did, this probably would be the way to do it. Notice if you change something, it goes sort of a buff color and prompts you to change things. Cloud print. On one of the communities I posted something about cloud print, and this is a new thing, and you can deploy printers to devices. So if you click on Manage here, you'll come up with all your cloud printers that you could use, and you can pick one. Let's have that one. Click on Add, click on Save, and that would mean all our Chrome devices could print to that printer. If you want to know more about setting up Cloud Print, I've got another guide. You can email me or you can look on my blog, and there's a bit about deploying cloud printers. At the moment it's a little bit tricky if you've not got cloud connected devices, but you can do it. And there are applications you can buy that will help you manage cloud printing now. Guest mode. So if you have a regular Chromebook and you turn it on, one of the options is guest mode, which allows anybody to click that and start using the device. It doesn't sign you in as any particular user. You just use the device. There won't be any apps deployed. All our users have logins, so I don't allow that. This one is really important, sign-in restriction, and quite a powerful one. So this restricts sign-in to a list of users. Now you could set this so a Chromebook in a particular sub-organizational unit could only be logged on by one user. But what I do is I want our Chromebooks to be able to be used by anybody in our organization, but I don't want them to be used by anybody else, and I certainly don't want users using private Gmail accounts on them. So you put in a wildcard star, so that's any user at your domain name can use the device. Anybody else can't. User data. This is another important one and has an impact on how the device works. Do not erase all local user data is the setting I would have by default, especially for devices which are being used predominantly by one person. Because first time you log on to a Chromebook, then the device syncs all that user stuff, apps, bookmarks, the works. That takes a bit of time. They say it's 10 seconds login and all that sort of stuff, but in reality if you've got lots of stuff to sync, it will be longer depending on your Wi-Fi speed and the speed of the Chromebook you're using. So do not erase all local user data. It means it doesn't have to sync that stuff every time the user logs on. However, if you've got devices which are multi-user, then I would strongly recommend you use the other setting, which is erase all local user data. So if you've got Chromebooks in a trolley which are used by lots of different classes, that basically wipes off all the rubbish every time a user logs off. And if you use the other setting on a class set of trolleys, the problem that can occur is users forget their passwords. Teachers reset their passwords. That's another thing I'll show you at some point, is how to allow teachers to reset passwords. There's a number of ways of doing it. It's quite easy. But a teacher will reset a password, but they've previously signed into that Chromebook with a different password, and that creates something called a passphrase issue, and it expects the user to know the password that they've forgotten. Whereas if you've got erase all local user data, that's not a problem. So we'll come back to that one in a minute. Power management, allow the device to sleep or not, up to you. Sign-in screen, this is an important one. Never show usernames and photos. If you've got multi-user devices, that's the option I'd go for. So you will get a login screen for a username and password and nothing else on the screen when it logs in. Allow public sessions. You won't be able to do anything here unless you configure a public session. So I've got no option there. Scheduled reboot. So this is the number of days between reboots. So this forces the device to reboot, which is useful if you've got machines like a Chromebox which are sitting there and they're turned on all of the time and you want them to make sure that updates are applied. Going on to updates, allow auto updates. I've got no restriction on the version of Chrome to use, but you can if you wanted to restrict your devices to a particular version of Chrome. Randomly scatter auto updates over a certain number of days. The reason you might want to do this is because if you've got a lot of ChromeOS devices and you don't do this, and then a new ChromeOS version comes out, and then you've got several hundred devices which all simultaneously decide, hey, it's a good time to update, that's going to hit your bandwidth. So if you scatter them over a number of days, which is what I do to suborganizational, this is the root level, remember. Allow auto reboots after updates, so it will reboot after applying an update. Restrict to a certain channel, so you can define what channel. Stable is what I'd recommend for all but test machines. Mobile data roaming is only applicable if you've got ones with 3G capability. Anonymous metrics is reporting things like crash data, so if the device crashes, why did it crash, and that gets reported to Google. I don't see any particular problem with allowing always send metric to Google. That just helps them to improve things. If you're paranoid about security and information about your domain going out, then you can turn it off. It's up to you. Device state reporting is something I've just recently turned on, and hopefully it'll work. Device state reporting allows devices, when they check in, to say, I'm on this version of ChromeOS, and things like your MAC code or your IP address, stuff like that will be reported, which is useful to see, and I'm not sure how long that setting's been there, because I was looking at this and thinking, oh great, you can do that now. So things will pop up from time to time. But if I click onto a suborganizational unit, you can see that the settings are not the same. So you can set here, I've got erase all local user data. These machines are multi-user. They're in a laptop trolley. In fact, they're in 2 laptop trolleys. Therefore, I don't want local user data being kept. So you can set these policies per suborganizational unit. And that will require a bit of thought and a bit of planning, but it's pretty easy to do. So if I go back to Chrome Management, the other thing that we can do, which is really important, is user settings. So these are settings which apply to people. And these settings apply when somebody signs into Chrome on a PC or a Mac or Linux or anything else. So be aware of that. This is not just for Chromebooks, although some of the settings are Chromebook specific. This is generally if the user is signed into Chrome. If you want policies like this to apply to Chrome and they're not signed in school, you'll need to use the Chrome administrator template and set that up within Windows Group Policy. There's a guide on how to do that on my YouTube channel, and that's something for a network administrator to do. If you're a network administrator, marvelous, you can do that. So I'm going to just illustrate this by looking at, expand that, students. So I can set policies for students, for staff, and they're not all the same because I want different people to be able to do different things and have a different experience. So I'm going to click on students here. So these are the settings for students. So policy refresh is how quickly things will change if I change something here. So this is 30 minutes. If I change policy, then within 30 minutes whatever I change will be applied to users, and the same goes for device settings. Apps and extensions, so you can control what type of apps and extensions users can use. I allow everybody to use everything. Pre-installed apps and extensions, so these are ones you fire out, so as soon as they log into Chrome on a PC or on a Chromebook, they will see and have access to these apps and extensions. So you can manage this by clicking on Manage Pre-install. This is really cool, and you'll see all the apps which I've deployed, things like Khan Academy, Chem Reference, Lucid Press, Google Keep, and so on, are all there. YouTube, Scientific Calculator, Plotly, Text. MoveNote for Education is awesome. Lots of really nice apps. And to do this, all you do is browse go to the Chrome web store and type in the name of the app. So it's not a bad idea to have a tab open on the Chrome web store and type in the name of the app, and you just click on Add. And a few months later, the user will have that app. It's really, really cool. Allowed apps and extensions. Okay, so allow all apps and extensions except the one I block. I haven't blocked any, but you can block certain extensions. So if you wanted to block Angry Birds, you could do. Pinned apps and extensions is again really cool. The ones with the little PC symbol at the side, no, it's not a PC, it's a Chromebook obviously. These apply to Chrome OS devices only. Okay, so this has no effect on a Windows computer. So managed pinned apps. So you can see that I pin these to the launcher. So that's the bar along the bottom. So users on our domain, students will get Gmail, Google Drive, Google Search, Calendar, Docs, Sheets, Slides, Drawings, YouTube, Lucid Charts, and Google Maps along the bottom, as well as the other ones if they click on the launcher thingy to fire up the others. But they're the ones they'll see along the bottom to give them easy access. Hey, Chrome Web Store. One thing you can do is create a custom Chrome Web Store. I've got a guide on how to do this on my blog, which is a little bit longer. I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but you can allow a custom section to appear on the Chrome website, assuming the user is signed in with their domain account. So I've got a Wheatley Park collection, and you can add, I've got 60 apps in there at the moment. So again, manage private and public apps, and you'll see in here in a second a list of all the apps which I've got in. These are apps that I'm recommending to my users basically. They can add any app, but they're good ones. Whizzing down a little bit, got Password Manager. I allow users to configure that. Show password button. I'll allow users to configure that. This is a Chrome OS 1. Screen lock. Automatically lock the screen on idle, which is just a basic security thing. I don't allow incognito mode. I do allow users to save their browsing history. This is an important one. Safe browsing, safeguarding thing. Always enable safe browsing. Users won't be able to turn that off. Malicious site. Prevent users from proceeding away from malicious sites. Okay, another security safety thing. Geolocation. Allows users to configure. Allows sites to detect geolocation. I allow users to configure. Networks, proxy settings. Okay, this is one to be really, really careful with. I've got it never use a proxy because in school we have a transparent proxy, so there are no user settings to configure. And that is what I'd strongly recommend. If your school has a proxy, a non-transparent proxy that you have to set, do whatever you can to move away from that because it causes all sorts of problems. If you set a proxy setting here, this is a real big health warning. So if you always use the proxy specified below, and you can put in the proxy settings, basically what you're doing is if that user takes the Chromebook to another network, it won't work. Simple as that. It's not even, it'll be using proxy settings that don't apply to that network. So it becomes a school-only device, essentially. Which is why, if you're going to set proxy settings, set it in the network settings, not here. Startup, I always show the home button. This is a nice thing. Home page is always the new tab page. Page to load on startup. Now this is echoed in the group policy bit, but this is our student portal. We have the staff one for staff one, so depending on whether you're a member of staff or you're a student, you'll get a different home page that fires up when you start the Chromebook. So something I'd recommend doing rather than just getting a blank screen. Contents, always use safe search. I enable screenshot, that's a specific thing. And there's loads of little things you can configure, like allowing 3D content, configuring how cookies work, whether or not you show images or not, allowing or not allowing JavaScript or blocking JavaScript in certain sites. Notifications. ChromeOS devices have desktop notifications, as do Windows devices. Do you allow desktop notifications? Plugins, you can configure those to work or not. Enable and disable plugins. Plugin finder, authentication, whether or not you use outdated plugins. I've left a lot of this stuff at default. Sometime I might go back and tweak this. Pop-ups, do you allow pop-ups or block pop-ups? Up to you. URL blocking. Now this is interesting because we have obviously web filtering that's applied across our domain. But you can do web filtering with the ChromeOS Management, and you can do it in the group policy as well. So you can see that I block these sites here for students, but I don't have to block them for staff. Or you could have a sub-organizational unit that has these sites allowed and others blocked. So this is URL blocking. So this is built-in web filtering in ChromeOS. It really supplements what you would do globally, but it allows you to have very fine control about what's blocked and what isn't blocked. Google Drive Sync, enable Google Drive syncing. I would recommend you have that on. This is only applicable if you've got 3G connected Chromebooks. Printing, enable printing. I would encourage you to have printing enabled, otherwise your users will probably get a bit mad. Bookmark bar, I enable the bookmark bar so they'll see it automatically, and encourage people to pin things to their bookmark bar. And allow bookmark bar editing. Spell checking service, enable the spell checker. I always offer translation, but you don't have to. You can never offer translation. Maybe the language department would prefer me to do that. I don't allow built-in developer tools. They're blocked. DNS pre-fetching just speeds things up a tiny bit. And then you've got some hard, but these are all ChromeOS specific ones down at the bottom here. So allow external storage devices. So you can either allow or disallow. There's quite a good argument for disallowing it, but because of the way things with memory cards with cameras and things are used, then I tend to allow this on ChromeOS devices. Microphone and audio input, prompt users to allow each time or disable audio input. So we use things like YouTube that have audio input, so that has to be allowed. Audio output, enable audio output, but you can disable the sound if you don't want. This is particularly useful if you have a Chromebox in the library. Video output, enable video output. I think we're down at the bottom now. So you've got all of those policies that you can configure against the particular sub-organizational unit. So the settings I've got for students are not the same as I've got for, say, teaching staff. So teaching staff, if I just whiz down here, have a different home page, for example. It's not there, it's somewhere further up here. So there we go. So page to load on startup is not the same. It's a staff.weeklypark.org rather than WPS portal. So that will pop up when you start it. So just a brief recap, it is really easy to manage ChromeOS devices. It is so easy compared to, say, group policy on a Windows domain. But it does require a bit of planning. So decide where you want your ChromeOS devices. Do you want them in separate sub-organizational units? Do you want them sitting with the users? Deploy networks to them. Decide what device settings you want, and then decide what user settings you want, and then enjoy a relatively hassle-free experience, certainly compared to using Windows devices. If you've got any questions, you can look on my post something to me on Google Plus, or email me at rdnixon.wheatleypark.org. But I'm always more than happy to help with anything Google Apps management wise. Okay, thanks for watching.